Sid wants to thank his subscribers for bringing this story to his attention. In January of 1998, it was reported that former KISS member Vinnie Vincent's ex-wife, 43-year-old Anna Marie Cusano from Shelton, Connecticut, was reported missing. Cusano was briefly married to Vincent in the 1980s. Attempts to reach her on her beeper went unanswered. The police would tell Connecticut News 30 that Cusano had a male friend at her home on Friday evening and left the house around 11 p.m. in her car. Police claimed it appeared as though Cusano was stepping out just for a short period of time, leaving her wallet at home. She was reported missing when her twin daughters, who were staying the night at a friend's house, failed to see her the next morning when she was supposed to pick them up. Her brother-in-law would pay a visit to her home in Shelton and noticed the radio was left on, as were the lights, and she left her purse behind and didn't notice anything out of the ordinary. Her brother-in-law would be quoted as saying, "I noticed everything was in order, like she had gotten up and walked out like she would be back in 5 minutes or something. It was very unusual." She would be reported missing shortly after. Cusano was a mother of two 15-year-old twin daughters, and at the time of her disappearance, she was employed as an executive secretary to the president of Executone in Milford. The police would end up locating Cusano's vehicle, a 1991 red Mazda 626, 45 miles from her home in Hartford, and found her blood in her car. An examination of her phone records would lead the police to a nearby boarding house on Prospect Avenue where her clothes were recovered and her DNA was found. Cusano's relatives explained to the police that she didn't appear to be depressed and was soon planning on taking a vacation. Her friends and family described Cusano as a charitable person who was involved in Toys for Tots and blood drives at her job, and she hadn't missed a day of work in 4 years. Throughout the course of the police's investigation, it came to light that Cusano had worked as an escort at night, and that explained why she was last seen at the boarding house in Hartford. A neighbor would tell the police they had seen Cusano within the boarding house several times in the weeks leading up to her disappearance. The neighbor would claim he saw several men working on Cusano's car and sometimes even saw the men driving the vehicle and wouldn't return until late at night. The neighbor described the men as loud and disruptive. The police's investigation revealed that Cusano was not only working as an escort, but her boss was running one of the largest prostitution rings in the state. The New Haven Register would report that Cusano's daughters had withheld some information from the police during the early days of the investigation. It wasn't until 4 days after her disappearance that the daughters finally told police their mother had a second job. The New Haven Register would report that Cusano told her daughters she was moonlighting as a masseuse. The paper quoting one of the daughters as to why she hid the information initially from the police, saying, "I didn't want to embarrass my mother if she was coming back." Cusano began her second job at least 4 months prior to her disappearance and was estimated to be making anywhere between $300 to $1,000 a night. The news of her double life came as a shock to her family and friends, who would reveal she was a loving and caring mother who was an exemplary employee. But her neighbors in Shelton would tell the police that they often saw lights on at all hours of the day at her home. Nearly a week after the disappearance, the police would eventually zero in on the man Cusano was visiting at the boarding house where her blood was found. The police were looking for a 37-year-old ex-convict named Gregory MacArthur. MacArthur had quite the rap sheet, including issuing bad checks, robbery, and assault. He was recently released from prison in September of the previous year and was said to have been working at a donut shop in Hartford and had only been living in the boarding house for several months. But following Cusano's disappearance, MacArthur was nowhere to be found. The police would end up locating the two men who were seen driving Cusano's car and questioned them. They would end up being drug dealers, and they would claim MacArthur gave them Cusano's vehicle in exchange for drugs. Years would go by before there was any update on the case. Blabbermouth would report that in September of 2000, the police would finally find MacArthur. He would be arrested by the Boston Police Department in connection with a sex-related crime in the city. When the Hartford police questioned MacArthur about Cusano's disappearance, he admitted to the crime of murdering her and helped investigators locate her remains in a secluded area about 60 miles away from her home. The police would claim MacArthur would change his story about what happened several times. He first claimed that he and Cusano were looking for drugs when they were both attacked by dealers. Then he claimed that Cusano attacked him with a knife and he was merely defending himself. MacArthur would face trial in 2002. The courtroom saw Cusano's family, friends, and co-workers in attendance, and some of them took to the witness stand. They painted a picture of Cusano as a caring mother who struggled financially to make ends meet. The trial would also reveal that MacArthur stole an American Express card from Cusano, which belonged to her ex-husband, Vinnie Vincent. A Hartford Superior Court jury would convict MacArthur of felony murder, manslaughter, larceny, and kidnapping charges. He would be sentenced to 60 years in prison. Thank you for watching, and be sure to hit subscribe for more rock and roll true stories.